Good morning from Vietnam. Thanks a lot, Bev, for joining our Inside Sharing show and share your stories with our audience. And on behalf of the listeners, I would like to say thank you to you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Hey, Bev, since you haven't been to Vietnam, please accept our invitation so that the next time that you travel to this part of the world, you have a new family, new friends that will be welcoming you when you get in town. Okay.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Yeah. And in our culture, it's an honor for us to, if you can help us to introduce a little bit about who you are and the works that you do. Would you do that for our audience,
I
please?
certainly will. So I live in California, but I'm a Jersey girl brought up on the East Coast and on the West Coast for the last couple of decades. I specialize in engagement, retention, and career development. And I have specialized in those areas for about 40 years. And I'm one of the lucky consultants in that my specialty has been evergreen. It stayed hot for all those years. So I am taking advantage of it. I think when the great resignation hit the world, some guiding person up there said, Beverly, I'll give you one more wave to ride. And it's going to be called the Great Resignation, and all your work fits it. Go. So I have been at it and for a long time.
Hmm. Wow. Beverly, I think the great resignation happened because of all the unsolved things within the corporate world, between the employer and employees, and the pandemic hit. It just another catalyst that let everything erupted, right?
Mhm.
And we're gonna examine your journey all together today to know why you have that passion for employee engagement, retention, and career development for the past 40 years plus many years to come. All right.
Okay.
Okay. So let's travel time together. When I was young, Bev, I would love to become an astronaut and go to outer space, right? But life did not give me any chance to do that, that thing that I love to do. So when you were young, what was your dream about the future self, Bev?
My dream was small because when I grew up, which was a long time ago, I just turned 79. So I have been on this earth for 79 years. And when I was young, a girl could only be a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher.
Mm.
And all my friends were becoming secretaries, nurses, or teachers. And my parents could only afford to send me to a local state college. So I went to a local state college to become an elementary school teacher.
Ah.
And like everybody, and I went through 4 years. And upon my graduation, I realized I wasn't that crazy about kids. And so maybe that was not the career for me.
Yeah.
So I applied to 3 graduate schools in different programs, but in social areas, a school in New York, a school in Washington, D.C., and a school in Boston. And I said, whoever gives me money, that's where I'll go. And
Ah.
fate will have drawn me in that direction. So only one school came through with money, and it was George Washington University in Washington, D.C. for me to go after a master's degree in higher education, administration. So I went off to George Washington and got a master's degree in college administration and spent the next 7 or 8 years as a college dean in schools I probably never could have gotten into as a student. So I worked at Brandeis University on the East Coast, and I moved to California to work at Pomona College, both elite institutions with very smart students who I found believed if I'm an A student and I go to an A school, there'll be an A line I stand in for an A career and an A life. And not everybody really could stand in that line. And it dawned on me during those years that I didn't think anybody had contingency plans. If plan A didn't work, do you have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D? And a lot of these students floundered because they, like you, wanted to be an astronaut and it didn't work. You needed a plan B. So I think my early interest in career development was to make sure that everybody had multiple options and multiple plans. And when I went back to UCLA for my doctorate, my doctoral thesis was on that subject, on career development. And my first book was titled Up is Not the Only Way, published by Prentice Hall. And it was the results of my doctoral research turned into a book. And little did I know that that would be my my long-term career. And I failed my doctoral orals 3 times because I was asked to do what's called phenomenological research, which means you study a phenomenon. And when you put all your data together, you should be able to see a theory in the phenomenon, which I didn't see. Although I tried many times. And finally, on the third try, I did a smart thing, and it taught me about me. I hired someone to listen to me talk about my data. And having another person to say, I learned this, I learned this, I learned this, gave me the aha that helped me really form a theory about what I was learning about career development. And on that last try, my committee said, okay, go write it. So that's the story. And the book opened up the whole field of consulting. I never went back to higher ed because companies started to call me and say, could you do for us what you talk about in your book? And I said, I don't know if I can. But I found some wonderful people to work with, and I grew a global business over 40 years.
Wow. I'm curious, when you send the application to 3 university and you got accepted by the George Washington University, right? Uh, for the other two universities, did you apply for the same major?
No, I
Oh, okay.
applied for different programs in every school, And I
Tell us.
left my career to fate.
Oh,
And I
what?
said, whichever one comes through, that's what I'll do.
Wow.
And for a while, I liked, being a college dean. I was not an academic dean. I was a student dean. I was in charge of housing. I was in charge of student activities, and I helped student leaders learn
Mhm.
to be better leaders. And that led me into the whole field of leadership development, which is what kindled my interest in going back for my doctorate.
Mm. What did you apply for the other two universities?
I can't even remember. You know, I cannot remember. Probably some aspect of education,
Oh,
because that was what I knew. But I'll have to try to remember
wow.
what it was. Um, but I ended up, I guess, where I was supposed to be.
Mm. I think that you believe in faith and God responds to it well, right?
Right.
So it gives you the path that that create an outstanding achievement and bring the best of what you can do to the people on
I
earth.
think
So
so.
so it's a very very nice story. Allow me to bring you back in time again, all right? Because for whatever that you've been doing over the years, it is nice. It comes from somewhere inside of you, your
Hmm.
personality, your background, whatever, that you have an interest on human, an interest on people, interest on knowing how to grow the people, right? So when you were
Hmm.
young, was there any signs of that, anything inside of you that showed that you had that?
You know, I always had a creative flair. I, I wrote poems to my parents on every holiday. And, now I close every one of my keynote speeches with a Dr. Seuss type poem that I wrote that goes with whatever book I'm talking about. So for all the books, I have a poem that sums up the whole book in
Oh,
1 minute. And I think it comes from growing up and writing poems to friends and my parents and all of that. So like the poem that goes with Love 'em or Lose 'em is titled You Will Pay If They Don't Stay.
yeah.
And there's a poem for career development. The poem for the book Up Is Not the Only Way is titled Do Not Fear, the Choices Are Here. So everything had a poem to go with it that summed up the book.
Wow. So for the 40 years in this space, Bev, all right. You've been seeing all the evolution of the talent development space over that, over the 4 decades, right? What keeps you in this space for so long?
I've often asked myself that. I think I just happen to pick subject areas that have stayed green, have stayed evergreen, but have changed slightly. So the models I developed in all those areas are kind of stay the same, but the way I talk about them changes. Like, for example, in my work on engagement and retention, love them or lose them. I just gave a speech this week. That's why I'm so tired. Um, at a conference on well-being. And the title of my speech was On the Road to Well-Being, Managers Really Matter. And I looked at the effect that managers have on the wellness of their people, emotional wellness, mental, wellness, all of that. And I was able to take all the chapters in Love 'Em and show how they affect your well-being. So the fact that I keep doing that, I think keeps me on my toes. Like in the 6th edition of Love 'Em, my publisher said, I want you to show me how every chapter around engagement relates to inclusion. And I said, well, I only think one chapter relates. He said, I think all the chapters relate. So it sent me back, and my co-author Sharon, back to the drawing board to say, wow. And it's 26 letters according to the alphabet. And we had to explore how they all related to inclusion. So that kind of thinking keeps me on my toes.
Wow. But you can do anything in the space of human resource, in the space of talent development. Why? Why on the employee engagement and retention that fascinated to you?
Because I believe, because I started with career, and I believe if, and Gallup says this, of all the different kinds of well-being, emotional, social, financial, etc., career well-being is the number one most important. That if you don't have career well-being, it affects everything else. And one of the statistics they said is that most heart attacks happen on a Monday when people have to go to work. And so the more I look at, other ideas through the lens of engagement, career is important to it, as is, all those things. And if people aren't engaged, they will not stay with your company. And every leader wants their good people to stay. So I guess my gift is make it simple. So I often talk in rhyme, or I use alliteration, or I do things like that have a smile factor. Like now people are talking about hybrid workforce.
Yep.
Some are in, some are out. So I wrote an article titled, The Hybrid Workforce Needs Hybrid Managers. And a hybrid manager is a flexible manager who doesn't use the same rule book for everybody.
Absolutely. Beverly. So for all the years you in the career space, right? And then in the employee engagement and retention, do you see the movement that makes to improvement in significant change over the years?
Someone asked me that recently at a big conference,
Uh,
and I said, alas, I don't see a lot of change.
I know.
I see some managers realize how important they are, not only in how I manage your work, but how we relate to each other. And the better I relate to you, the better work you'll do.
Mm.
Um, but I think we'll be teaching that forever.
What happened? Why there was not good progress in that change though?
I think, and this happens to me, you get so caught up in your to-do list.
Uh,
Like, all these papers on my desk are going to have to be done this weekend, that you forget to say to people around you, how are you doing?
mm.
You know, and managers are more overwhelmed than ever with just getting the work out the door. So I always talk about um, building engagement, retention, development into the flow of work. Like, it's not about a sit down conversation for an hour
Mm.
during your IDP time, individual development planning meeting. It's all the time. And it might take 2 minutes here and there. Uh, and it's a hard thing to teach, I guess.
So if that's the case, Bev, was the productivity and 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 the whole notion of being more productive in the organization cause we have so much on our plate that we need to do and that break our relation, our time to build good relations with our colleagues.
Give me that again.
Okay.
Good relations with our colleagues.
Yes. So I'll share the stories. Okay. I'm one of the person always bring a question about productivity. Okay, we always hear companies that's trying to achieve more with less, right? So more results, less people, more results, and more performance and less resources, more productivities, but less people involved into the process, right? So it's leaner, better, whatever. And I had the belief for a very long time that that whole notion lead to so much works for the people, so much work for, and then we feel that meetings after meeting, and then people after work carry the laptop homes and continue doing to work, and and they don't have time to relate well with one another anymore. So in your field, do you have the same experience like that?
You know, I personally do. Um, I personally do have that experience. That I know, if you interviewed my husband, who just called saying, "Where are you?" If you interviewed my husband, he would say she works all the time and she doesn't make enough time to play. Uh, and I have to work hard at that. I could work all day, take a break for dinner, and come back and work into the night. And the only reason I don't do that every day, I do it many days, is because I have a wonderful 49-year marriage. And he wants me to sit next to him when he watches television. So I think if I was single, I would work 24/7 maybe, but I don't know. I love it. I don't love it like I do love it. but I like it a lot, what I do. And you mentioned colleagues. The thing that makes me love my work are my colleagues who I turn to for help all the time, or I turn to for ideas or for brainstorming.
Mm.
And many of my clients I see as colleagues. I love when a client says, that they want to work with me to craft my keynote
Mm.
instead of saying, whatever you do, just come on and do it. Because it always gets better when I can co-design
Yeah.
with the client.
Mm.
And I like that, even though it takes longer.
Yep. Then for the employee engagement, right? People say that retention in the key talents, the employees are always the great assets of the company. But then, in my opinion, though sayings was nice, but the doings, it didn't come parallel with what they were saying. And leaders and manager was one an amateur, was once the employee in the bottom of the organization and growing up as normal, right? Why? What make them forget about how they fare when at the bottom,
Right.
and not making that change when they grow into the ladder?
One of my favorite books that I keep on the shelf near me
Hmm.
was written years ago, and it's called The Knowing Doing Gap.
Hmm.
Sutton is one of the authors, Sutton. I can't remember the second author, but I think, we know what we know, and we often let lessons jump over our heads because we say, oh, I know that. But if you say, but have you done that lately? The answer is, well, I didn't have time. Like, here's an example. When Love 'em or Lose 'em first came out, like 20 plus years ago, I remember being introduced by a general manager to his 75 leaders. He was introducing me, it was live, and he said, I want to introduce Bev Kaye, the author of Love 'em or Lose 'em. And then he said, everything she's about to tell you, you already know. And I thought, I'm going to die. I have nothing to say then. He said, they already know it. And then he said, because your mother taught it to you when she said, play nice in the sandbox. And I thought he's right. In Love 'em or Lose 'em, that's been out for almost 25 years, there is nothing new.
Hmm.
It's, are you doing it? And the answer is no, not always. No, when I'm busy, I don't, etc.
Hmm.
So, and that's true for all of us, me included, me included.
What can we do to do it often, more frequent?
You know, Sometimes I say to an audience, or we do a lot of training in all of this.
Mm.
We try in the training to say, keep a list of all your employees and fill it in with questions you could ask them
Mm.
to give you more insight into who they are. So, like, one thing I noticed about you
Mm.
is you come from curiosity.
True.
Your questions are good. And I might say, were you always like that? I want to compliment you on your curiosity. And I'd love to know where that comes from and what you're most curious about. And even if we had 3 minutes for that conversation, you will feel good. I noticed something about you and I asked you a question about it. And you might not have the answer. You might say, I don't know where I learned to be curious, but you will go home and sleep on it and you'll think about it. And that's a great conversation. And you'll go home and tell your spouse, my boss asked me a good question today, and etc. So maybe it's that easy.
Mm.
And maybe I have to say this more in my own work. Have you asked your employees a good question about themselves every day? Have you asked your spouse a question about themselves every day?
Mm.
You know, and when we ask our kids, how was school? That's a boring question. Oh, it was good. But if we say, what one thing happened in school that made you turn off? Or what's one thing that happened in school that made you light up? There's something you can do something about.
In that
Maybe.
space, in in your answer, I need to ask this question, Beth. When you ask question to employees, right, the people know also whether or not you have the intention to care. And when you ask that question, in my example, my own example, okay, I work with one of the best leaders, that I ever happened to meet in my life. I love her to death. She's not just a boss; she's like a mother to me. And and she asked me at least 3 times about my marriage and how many children I have. That's very simple, out of her curiosity, but it repeated 3 times. And one day I told her, because I really care for you, I need to give you this feedback. You asked this 3 times already, and I answered you 3 times already,
Oh,
but you don't remember that. Okay, and it hurt my feelings because you rather don't ask me anything, and then when you ask me and then you don't remember, I don't feel like I'm
that
judging.
is a great example.
Hmm.
And for you to have the nerve and the guts to tell that leader that, I'll bet you that was a priceless lesson for that leader. Like, gee, how many times do I ask people and their answer goes over my head? Because I'm just asking it to be nice.
Yeah.
Wrong.
So
Not that you have to remember every single thing you ever said to every employee, but, you know, apologize then and say, I remember asking you this before and I forgot.
mm,
How many did you say you had? It's etc.
uh,
I don't know, but good for you for saying that.
that the question I have is, out of the busy things that managers and leaders do, right? And if they want to engage into the conversation, what can they do not to make the same mistakes that my boss had in the past?
You know, um, in Love 'em or Lose 'em, it's written according to the alphabet. And every letter of the alphabet stands for something we learned in our research. The J chapter stands for jerk.
Yeah.
And the subtitle is Are You One? And when we first wrote the first edition and we went to our publisher and we said, we want to write a chapter on jerk bosses, he said, well, why? You know, your book is positive. That's a negative. And we said, we have to write it because one of the things we did in our research was we took exit interviews and we found the person in the next company they moved to. And we met with them and we said, you wrote blah, blah, blah on your exit interview. What didn't you write?
Oh.
And they said, my boss was a jerk in whatever language. And I couldn't stand it anymore. So I left. So I think that some managers, we've been teaching this now for 25 years, will give the jerk list to their employees and say, am I doing any of these? Because I don't want to. Tell me which one I'm doing. And maybe, you would be able to say to that manager, well, you don't listen. And that manager, if they were good, would say, well, what do you mean? Give me an example. And then you'd be able to do that.
Imagine if every manager, every leaders, every supervisor, even every colleague, right, give to a next person that just listens and ask that very question. Am I doing any of these on the list? And
It
listen to
takes
the
guts.
best,
It
right?
takes guts, right? Like if you ask that, you have to be willing to hear
Mm,
what they say you do
mm,
and not deny it,
um,
but ask for more information. Can you give me an example? You know, I don't remember that. When did I last do it? You
um,
know, it would be great if we could do that.
absolutely. Absolutely. It takes a lot of nerve, but if we want to really get better at what we are doing, then feedbacks like that is invaluable, right?
Right, right.
Hey, hey Bev, let's travel back in time. When you were young and then to what you are doing now, there's a huge difference. The world is also huge different. Was there any time in your childhood, in your adulthood, you imagine that you will be travel the world, meeting so many companies and many leaders, and train them on how to lead their
No,
organization better? No.
no. I'll tell you another thing about me that was true growing up and is true to this day.
Mm.
I was a terrible stutterer. So the thought of me standing on a stage doing a speech never entered my mind.
Oh.
And I still stutter. I am still a bad stutterer to this day. For some reason, I don't stutter on a stage or in an interview like this. But if I walk next door to my assistant's office, I probably would stutter asking her to do something or asking her a question. So never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd make my living doing this. And maybe that is a good story for
Mm.
anybody who's listening. And sometimes I tell it and I say, so if you look at somebody in the front of the room and you say to yourself, boy, she or he, they really have it together. I
Mm.
wish I was more like that. There's probably something that you have that they don't. So nobody has it all 100% together, even you.
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. There's so much that I need to learn also. So much. Bev, I have two last questions for today so that you can go home with your 39 years married husband who are waiting at home for you to watch television with
Tell it
him.
with him, right? Yes, right.
And you've been having a long trip already, so it's good for you to go home and rest. So, the first question, Bev, is about thinking. Okay, so my wife and I, we have been on the quest to find a secret at how people think, because we believe that thinking, our ability to think these days, is diminishing, and we need to improve that. So I asked every single person joining our show this question: how have you been helping you to improve the ability to think, Beth?
Uh, I think I improve my ability to think when I'm given a challenge and I don't know where to go, and so I read. I might not read the whole book, I might scan, but like when I had to talk about well being, I knew nothing about all the information out there. And so I Googled it and I read some books and I learned how to fit it into a presentation. And when you have to make the words come out of your mouth about something you didn't know,
Mm.
you gain an ability to learn it and talk about it,
Ah,
I guess. But thinking is hard. A lot of
yes.
people, I would think, don't want to think. They just want to do.
Yeah.
They don't want to think it through, or they don't want to do it differently than they've always done it, maybe.
And that probably the lead back to the thesis that you talked earlier. People need to have plan A, plan B, plan C,
Right,
right? So
right,
that's all coming from the thinking. Thanks for sharing that. So your way of thinking is giving a challenge situation that you don't know anything about that, and then you're gonna use your creative mind, and
right,
you've been having
right,
to
right,
read and research about that.
right.
Thanks for
Not before I don't say I can't do it. I mean, my first response is, well, I don't know anything about that. I can't do it. And once I get over that hump and start reading and, enjoying that, you know, then, uh, then I'll add it to my repertoire.
uh, so
So,
this is not the second question, but I need to ask that also. How did you overcome that I don't know it and then move into the next stage, Beth? A lot of people stay there.
yeah, you're right. You're right. You are good. You ask good questions. And your question shows you listened to my answer and you dug deeper. And maybe the big answer to that is go deeper, not wider.
Mm.
Like ask something deeper when someone answers a question. Uh, and I think too many of us go on to the next question instead of pausing and saying, what did she mean by that? Or whatever. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what came to mind.
I hardly understand that, and that relates to me. So thanks. Um, Last question. All right. So we know the past. we know that you only have three choices when you were young, either the nurse, right, the secretary, or become a teacher. And then you went to, like college to learn, like education and become elementary teacher, but you did not find that you love with teaching kids, right? So apply for higher education. God takes you to this path for 40, amazing years, right? Now let's go into the future a little bit, Beverly. Okay, is there anything exciting that you and your team are doing you want to share with me and the audience now, so we together can celebrate with you in advance?
It's a lovely question. And actually, I'm doing two things with my team that has captured my interest. One is years ago, at least 30 years ago, I developed a creative style tool, assessment tool with a colleague. And it's based on the idea that everybody's creative. We're
Mm,
just creative differently. And we have to learn to work with someone with a different creative style. And we had a training program and we taught it. This is like 30 years ago. And then we put it on a shelf
wow.
because my sales team at the time, it didn't go with what we were doing. Now that everybody is looking at what are the skills needed in the
Mm,
21st century, creativity is one of them.
yeah.
So we took it off the shelf and we're reviewing it and redoing it, and we're going to build it again. So that is big. And the other is, I've been talking about career mobility for years. I think the one career mobility option that people aren't thinking about is growing in place
Mm,
or job enrichment. So I'm working with another group of colleagues on a job enrichment tool
mm,
that would be, cloud based and etc. So both those projects are in the beginning stages,
wow.
and that's
Wow.
what I'm working on.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. You have the creativity inside of you. You need to have people to learn and master it, because creativity is important. And like you said, the second part is, the career growth, right? Like your job enrichment in help them to, because promotion is limited, but it can be unlimited also, of how we see the potential within the job. And when
You're
we
right.
can, yeah. So that, if I wish you have all the resources, all the support, and and make that happen, so that it can solve a lot of
Okay.
things for people. And we're going to work more creatively, we're going to work more happily, right? Happier. And
Very
when,
good.
yeah, when we get home, we can proudly talk to our wife, our children, about works, and make hope for the next generation going to work,
Right.
and bright side of everything. So thanks a lot, babe.
Very good. No, you were a great interviewer and you gave me some ideas. And the last thing I'll say, because it relates to all of this, and I've said it in a couple different books, is that I think people have to be opportunity minded instead of being opportunity blinded. And too many of us say, oh, woe is me. There's nothing for me, instead of saying, well, what's the next thing that might be right for me? So, are you opportunity minded or opportunity blinded? You, my friend, are opportunity minded, clearly. So, that's
Thanks,
what I
babe.
think.
Thanks, babe. Thanks, babe. I'll go home with your husband. He's waiting. He's been waiting. So
That's so
I
stupid.
thank you. I oh, he's upstairs. I I I wish you well. I wish you all the best, and I look
Thank
forward to
you.
meeting you one day in person, Bev. That would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you. It was a pleasure. And you woke me up again. I was tired when we started. Now I'm awake. So good. Okay, thank you and thank you. And I'll watch for it to come out in January.
January.
Okay.
Yes. Enjoy
Okay.
the weekend also. Okay.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.